Okay, so today we're talking about interpretations. Interpretations of the core semantic concept of predicate logic, just like truth value assignments, which remember were rows on the truth table, are the core semantic concept of sentential logic. Both of these are kind of like models of the world. They're a way of describing the world. And because the language, or I should say, they're a way of describing a possible world, a way that the world might be. And because predicate logic is a more complex language, its descriptions of possible worlds are going to be much more in-depth and complex than the descriptions in sentential logic. So both of these are kind of like possible worlds that will make certain sentences of the language false and certain sentences of the language true. And we can use these models in order to do things like evaluate the validity of arguments, because remember, a valid argument is one in which there's no way, there's no possible world, no matter how far-fetched, in which the premises of the argument are all true and the conclusion is false. All right, so I want to point out, though, that all along I've been calling these models, and I think that's a good name for them. It's a good description of them. But the term, I'm not going to use that term like that anymore because that has kind of a specific meaning in predicate logic. A model in predicate logic is a specific kind of interpretation. It's an interpretation that makes all of the sentences you're working with true at the same time. And what we're going to do today is we're actually going to take a look at some uninterpreted sentences, meaning they're just presented to you in the language of predicate logic, and we're going to try to make a model of them so we can kind of take a look at, it'll kind of help us get a feel for what these sentences say in predicate logic and what the different parts of an interpretation are. And it'll also help me to demonstrate how to build an interpretation graphically, which I think is a really good tool for helping to organize your thinking about interpretations. So I like to kind of like draw a picture of my interpretation as I build it. And this is not really going to be, it's not really going to be a part of your answer, you know, if you use this method. So you don't want it, this is not something you would turn into me, but it's a good thing to do like on your scratch paper to help you get a feel for like what you're doing and keep it systematic. So let's take a look at these sentences and see what a model of these sentences would look like. So as we read the sentences, we'll start putting into our interpretation what we need to make these sentences true. And, you know, we want to keep this interpretation as simple as possible so it's tractable to us to think about. And one thing that you can do, especially when you get down to these two-place predicates, is try to kind of think about what they might say in English, and that gives you a better feel for what you're doing. So let's go ahead and explore how to do this, all right? So our first sentence is PA. So we're talking about A is a constant that's the name of something in your universe of discourse, which I often call a domain, but it's a name of some object that's in your universe of discourse. So we have this object. Let's call it, let's give it a name. Let's call it Albert. And A is the constant that's picking out this object, Albert. And what do we know about Albert? Albert is P. So whatever this predicate P could be is a cat, is a philosophy major, it could be anything. But and we don't really need to know. We only need to know what goes what the extension of P is, or what falls under P, or what is P. That's all we really need to know about this predicate. But sometimes giving it like a description in English helps us to think about it. So anyway, Albert is P, and the second sentence says something is P. At least one thing is P. That's already true. Albert is P. And something is C as well. Okay, so something is C. We need a new circle in order to represent the extension of this new predicate C. But we don't have to add anything else to our domain or to our universe of interpretation. We can just do this and have these two circles overlap. So Albert is P and C. Okay. As long as you don't have too many predicates that you're working with, you can have them all overlap, which is kind of useful. So now this says not everything. So not all x or not everything is px or cx. So there has to be something outside of both of these circles. So now we need to add a new object to our domain. There has to be something else in there in our universe of discourse. So let's go ahead and have a new object we'll call Beth. Okay, so this now there needs to be so this is where this gets a little bit hard, a little bit tricky. Okay, and this I'm not going to have you guys do deductions with these kind of two-place predicates, but I want you to kind of see them and know how to read them. So let's call R respects, just for kind of ease of making this easier to talk about. So this is saying there is some x that respects all y. So in other words, there is some x that respects everyone or everything. Okay? So let's make Albert our x that respects everything. And for these two-place predicates, it's easy to represent these with arrows. So let's draw an arrow from Albert down to Beth. Like so, but Albert respects everything, and Albert's a thing, so Albert has to respect himself as well. So there we go. And now everyone respects Albert. Okay, remember A is Albert. So that's the constant that we decided is going to pick out this object Albert. So everyone respects Albert. Well, Albert respects Albert, but we need Beth to respect Albert now. Okay, so that's easy to do. We just draw an arrow. So, okay, so we're done. Now sometimes this is a pretty simple example. A lot of the times it's going to take a significant amount of playing around with your diagram to try to get this to work. All right, but now, like I said, this is just kind of to help us think. We're ready now to actually define our interpretation formally in the kind of the way that the book does it. All right. So remember, interpretation kind of has three parts. The first one is the universe of discourse, or the domain. And remember, that's a set of objects. Well, what is in our universe of discourse? Two things. Albert and Beth. Okay, so now we need to say what these constants are picking out, what objects our constants are naming. Okay. All right, now Beth, we didn't use, Beth wasn't specifically named by a constant in any of these sentences. And a lot of the times there are going to be things in your interpretation that just don't have names, like especially if you're dealing with numbers or something like that. Or they're not picked out by any constants that you're using. So we don't have to refer to Beth by any constants. But we can do that just for the sake of completeness if we want to. We can say something like this. B will pick out Beth. All right? So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to define the extensions of our predicates. So first, P. Now remember, predicates are defined as in terms of a set of ordered tuples. And this is a one-place predicate, so it has tuples with only one thing in them. So, and P has got one thing in it. It's got Albert. Excuse me. That was a mistake, what I just did. Because what's in the extension of P is Albert. It's not the it's the actual object. It's not the constant, right? Again, that's kind of like the difference between saying that Casey is teaching Phil 170. It's me, this person who's talking right now, who's teaching Phil 170. It's not my name. It's not the word Casey. Okay. Now, what about C? We need to say what the extension of C is. And the extension of C is the same as the extension of P. There's only one thing in that circle that we drew. And that, again, that's Albert. So we have an ordered tuple with only one thing in it. Albert. I guess I should capitalize that for consistency, right? And now R, okay? Okay, so R is going to need 3 ordered tuples in it, okay? So let's take a look at what those would be. First of all, Albert respects himself, okay? I'm using abbreviations now because I might run out of space. Albert respects Beth. And Beth respects Albert. Okay, that's supposed to be a curly bracket there. I kind of ran out of space. Okay. So, again, sometimes it helps to give these names and, descriptions in English. Like we could say, is a philosophy major, is a cat, respects or loves or something for these 2-place ones. But we don't have to do that. As far as logic is concerned, all we need to know are the extensions of these predicates, meaning what's in them, and that's all that we really have to say about them. So that's our complete interpretation. That's a model of these sentences. We have our universe of discourse. We have what the constants of the language are naming or what they're picking out. And we have the extension of the predicates, and that's all there is to it.